So, this afternoon, we start with Sarah Escoubet, who is brand strategist, master's degree in marketing and communication, founder of Loomvelt. It's an equine marketing and communication agency. She's an advocate for horses' welfare, reasoned equitation, and science-based solutions via the account Canter and Coffee on Instagram since 2015. She will present the International Rider Marketing Narrative and Hyperflexion, a reflection about how the international riders' representation in media led marketing materials such as visual assets, ads, and even product design to actually promote hyperflexion, and how this common representation impacts horses' welfare both inside and outside the arena.
Good afternoon. I hope you had a good break. I'll try to keep this brief and interesting so digestion won't hit you before the end of the presentation. I'll start with a very simple question. Have you already tried to search for pictures of dressage in Google? If not, or if you're curious, please take a minute and do it while I quickly introduce myself. So I'm French, and I'll try my best to do this presentation in a decent English so everybody here and on the live will be able to understand me. Just so you can know a bit more about my background, I've been riding horses since a very young age. Work while I started my career in video games, worked as a communication officer on various projects, some for Microsoft, and then I was hired as head of communication in a pharmaceutical laboratory specialized in equine dermatitis. Job that I quit in 2021 to create Loomvelt, which is a branding, communication, and marketing agency. So, if you search for dressage pictures on Google, this is what you should find. What does it tell us? First, it tells us that Google, so the company that has had the most information about all of us, chose to show pictures of horses that are very often in a state of hyperflexion. Why is it bad? It's bad because Google should always try and show you the things that it feels are the most appropriate to you or to your preferences. And indeed, try and keep you on the websites it has referenced for you, because that's where they just generate money, all right? So why is that? That the company that has had the most information about us simply cannot show us dressage horses that are in a good attitude. I mean, we all know it exists, we've seen it, but Google can find it. This is what leads us to the very first part of the topic I chose to speak about, the International Rider Marketing Narrative. If Google can't show us pictures of properly trained horses, it's because a very vast majority of the mainstream media doesn't show pictures of properly trained horses. In fact, it's simple. Google will allow credibility to media, say website, when people click on a link that is affiliated with said website. Websites with the most clicks are considered by Google to be reliable, which means, even if it's like journalistic or commercial content, most of the pictures that brands and media chose to display on their websites are the wrong ones. They are the ones where we see this kind of attitude. Now, what happens if we search for, let's say, 60s dressage? That's better. 70s? 80s? 90s, we're starting to see a switch. And now, what happens when we see, let's say, 2000s dressage pictures? This is the very first picture you will have on Google if you search for this precise words on Google. The assumption here is that as soon as the internet took off, as soon as it started growing, and as soon as media figured out how to use it to make business, they flooded the web with what are now the images of horses we see everywhere. Images that have become the unconscious standard for what international riders looked like. And just as everything that is a first in any field, it's stuck. To compare, this is the same thing with, like, let's say, how we say escalator or frisbee or Kleenex. These are all brand names that are broadly used as basic nouns. Because it was first, it stuck. So what was the ideal image of a successful rider 20 years ago? It looked like this: very bright colors, polished boots, shiny horse, completely off strides as long as it looks spectacular. And of course, hyperflexion was often part of the package. At that time, the method seduced a lot of internationals because everybody thought it was perfect. It let horses to express a lot more in the arena. It helped horses to develop gigantic muscles, especially on the neckline. It helped riders to have a lot less visible defenses on the arena, and inherently to win more often. And this became the basic combo you would see in any media. Now time goes on, and we're here in 2023. People who were 15 or 20 years old when the Y2K problem mark hit are now more about 40, and some of them are working in the equine industry and in marketing and communication. They grew up, and their brain crystallized around the idea that the international rider, the figure of authority, looks like this. This is what you want to look like when you're 15 in the 2000s. And now, they just reproduce what's working. They are just using images that are proven to make views. They are just holding tight onto the good old scheme that made the trick for the last 2 decades. This doesn't happen only in communication. This is something infused in all of us somewhere, and whether or not we took the time and effort to deconstruct it, like all of us, this is engraved in our memory. It is here because this is how the principle of familiarity, or mere exposure effect, works. We will always prefer something that we are used to see or experience, unless or until we realize it does harm to ourselves. And see, here's the key. We will prefer, like desire, what our brain is used to see, unless or until it does harm to ourselves. Now, while keeping this in mind, let's compare some other sports to ours for a minute. Back in the 40s, American football players wouldn't play with security equipment as they do today. Helmets weren't even a mandatory piece until 1939. But when player John stopped recognizing his own children because of too many concussions, doctors started to raise red flags. Same thing for little Anya, 7 years old, who had her adductor literally torn apart by her dance instructor in the 50s. When she couldn't lay her feet in front of the other 20 years later, we started to wonder, maybe it is bad to actually cause damage to someone for sport. If you look at any sports evolution in 100 or so window, you'll see that every sport improved, and even ours. Airbags, for instance, better helmets, better fabric for breeches, better saddles, better everything. But when it comes down to the horses, we did not, and when I say we, I mean riders in the broader sense, we did not change our overall way of learning, training, and riding. And it all comes down to the fact that it does no harm to us directly, but to the horses. And this is one of the reasons nothing seems to be able to change, because it does no harm. So the real question is, how could we actually do harm? Hold on to that. To answer this question, we have first to have an understanding of how marketing works. It is often described as the art of selling. But really, marketing is all about what you can make somebody feel about themselves through a product. Take Apple customers, for example. They buy Apple because it makes them feel better. They will tell you it's the design, or it's the easy user interface, or it's the capacity of the computers to do this or that thing. But the truth is, they could have had the exact same specs with any other brand, just not Apple. It doesn't matter to them because they don't want the specs. They want apple because it makes them feel good. So what's the recipe? In marketing, there's 5 factors that allow you to sell something easily and rapidly. First, it has to be something people won't fear, so something a tad bit familiar. Second, has to be something innovative enough to spark interest. Third, it has to be easy to use, implement, understand, and or buy. Of course, the easier the better. Fourth, it has to show quick results, or to have the capacity to transform your life. And lastly, it has to address a specific problem or desire of the customer. You take something people are used to, say horse riding. You add a little bit of spice. It's the early 2000s. I mean, everything has a chance to be exciting. But let's say you add a different method that you claim is altogether good for the horses, better for your day-to-day based training, and easier to implement. Doesn't require particular knowledge either. There you have it. Achieve your St. George dreams, learn the very new, very effective, very easy method of LDR, so you can look just like your favorite rider. And just like that, something that was just a turn of events, media having only pictures of horse being ridden in hyperflexion or LDR, and the fact that it apparently had the power to turn anybody into a successful rider, led hyperflexion to become a worldwide desirable and marketable phenomenon. And brands, well, they couldn't just let this slip away. They had to hop on the bandwagon, so we started to see pictures of horses in a state of hyperflexion everywhere in equestrian advertising. Pads, halters, saddles, whatever could be put on the horse had to be advertised with a horse people would find round and brilliant. Now, why did it blow out like this? As I said right before, good marketing has to make things easy for the customer. And hyperflexion has this pernicious advantage that it is, indeed, easy. Easy to recognize, easy to memorize, and it makes good sense when we heard during all our years of practice, make him round, get him round. I mean, it is round. And all in all, it's the perfectly branded dressage and international look anybody was able to recognize at that time. It was easy enough to read and broadly used enough in media to be associated with talent, good work, and success in sport. And in a matter of just a few years, hyperflexion was literally everywhere. And as every product that just becomes mainstream, it took life on its own. If hyperflexion became what customers were looking for, then brands had to insert demand. This is literally marketing 101. We saw draw reins, howlets, bridles, even spurs that claimed they would help you have more rounded, lifted horses. And fast enough, every other ad was displaying a horse with the low, deep, and round attitude. And this is at this precise moment that the blame doesn't fall on media anymore, but on advertising. Because here we kind of crossed the path where hyperflexion wasn't just the default attitude displayed in media. It became the thing you want to sell. And you see, the thing with the things you want to sell is you won't abandon it just because time has changed. No, you will try and advertise it in other ways. You twitch your copywriting, you modify your commercial arguments, you adapt your claims and sales speech in order to adapt and survive in a changing environment. Because now that we have the thing we want to sell, we cannot just let go and finally advertise something else. We have money on the table and a stock of products and pictures that were very expensive to buy that we now have to get out of the company system. So we're on a two-speed roll here. Now in 2023, some of the media, not all, are trying to display better images, as they found out the public isn't responding positively to the hyperflexion package quite as it was before. But brands that were a little bit behind 20 years ago are still a little bit behind today. Because that's sadly how it works. And we now know that brands and media work very closely together because one serves the interests of the other. So what happens is that it creates a loop where neither party wants to fully give in, where we're kind of stuck in between the, yes, we want to change, but it's hard because there's no material available scenario. And yes, it's true. I mean, if Google can find it, stock images cannot either. And we don't really want to change because, I mean, it worked good until now. And as neither media nor brands are willing to take a step forward, consumers, on the other hand, continue to be fed the idea that an overly developed neckline is desirable, that LDR is somehow pleasing to the eye, that success comes with a tense horse face, and that there is nothing inherently wrong with the very questionable choice of pictures on a vast majority of official communications, even the one coming directly from high authority figures such as the FEI or the national federations themselves. Now, a market that doesn't know something is harmful cannot stop liking that very thing. A market that has been taught something is good will continue to think this thing is good until proven wrong many times. And no veterinary studies, no evidence, no proof could be of any help. Here we're talking about convictions, talking about habits, so deeply engraved in people's mind that we have to take everybody with us or nothing will change. They want to know why. Have you ever overheard a conversation between someone who thinks the earth is flat and someone who thinks the earth is definitely not flat? It's going nowhere. And no one is going to concede. No matter how many scientific facts are quoted, how much physics and astronomy knowledge is used, this isn't going to end well. This is the exact same story here. Trying to force a change on somebody who's confident in his opinion isn't going to do anything. You're going to speak to a wall eventually, and even reinforce this person's belief. And then they'll just proceed to go back to what they feel comfortable with. In our case, giving very good scores to horse ridden in LDR, using hyperflexion as a common training technique, finding deformed muscles beautiful, and so on. And this is precisely why marketing and media have such a big role in all of this. This is why we, as a collective, have to find a way to address the problem at its source, not by demonizing people individually, because this will eventually lead to us being ostracized, but by creating a new environment that is going to ostracize hyperflexion. So what can we do? Remember when I said, how could we actually do harm? There we have it. A market cannot change until one end or the other changes 100%. This is what happened, for instance, in France with the Evin law that banned any advertising for cigarettes and restricted advertising for alcohol. So, how can we do harm? We have to make our way into an environmental change for brands, for companies, because this is creating the intolerance to something that was once normal, that what we want to achieve. Because this is, in my opinion, our best shot to make a big change. So what can be changed? We could try, I'm sorry, I'm late. Allez. We could do this by guiding brands, offering documentation for communication officers that they can learn which type of images to use and which not to, by creating, say, labels that could be given to brands that respect a well-being in marketing chart, by making online courses for equine communication officers to educate them, to teach them a bunch of best practice. And not only in hyperflexion, though. Have you seen the halters in brand advertising? It's awful. And I will end with this and try to make it quick. We could do this by restraining brands. I mean, there's something we can do with governing bodies, advocating for enforcement of laws like the Evin law that I quoted before, that would frame what can or cannot be displayed in equine marketing material, by working together with local authorities to achieve better marketing in horses, maybe on a smaller scale. There's a whole lot of possibilities of things to do. Those are just ideas put for thought. And they are here to help you gain perspective on what could be done in light of everything we've already discussed today and might be an echo to this presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Sarah.